guys, my name is Helen. Welcome back to FilmGeek520, and before we get started today, I would like to make a special announcement regarding my schedule. You may have known, if you've been following my Twitter or my upload schedule for the last 2 months, that I have been trying to do uploads every week, but there have been 3 times now where something has come in the way of that, and this week it turned out to be a technical one because I did film and my footage was very blurry and I didn't have time to redo it. This is attempt number 2, and to help alleviate some of my stress, I've decided to go to an every other week upload schedule like I used to do. That gives you guys something consistent to look forward to, and that takes a little bit of the pressure off of me timing-wise to get these done. Thank you guys so much for sticking by me through all of that. And without further ado, let's jump back in time and talk about the 1998 remake of The Parent Trap. This film is the directorial debut of Nancy Meyers, who had previously written several collaborations with her then husband Charles Shire. They share a co-screenwriting credit on this film along with the original film's screenwriter David Swift, and Meyers and Shire are also listed as producers on this project as well. The Parent Trap was released on July 29, 1998 in the United States, and it was released on December of the same year in the UK. It was made on a budget of $15 million, and it took in around $92 million at the box office, which is pretty good. It also garnered a lot of positive critical reception upon its release, and it has become a staple in the movie collections of several 90s babies, including myself. This film is, of course, a remake of the original 1961 version starring Hayley Mills. This is the story of Annie James and Hallie Parker, both played by Lindsay Lohan, an identical set of twins who were separated at birth following the divorce of their parents. Annie has lived in London, England her entire life with their mother Elizabeth, and Hallie was raised in Napa, California by their father Nick. The two have a chance meeting when their parents send them to the same summer camp, and they eventually decide to switch places so that each can meet the parent that they never knew, with the long-term goal of getting their parents back together in the end. This movie has been on my mind recently because of the announcement of the new catalog that's going to be on Disney Plus at launch. There are several projects that the platform is considering for a remake, and The Parent Trap is one of those properties. Side note, I will not be subscribing to Disney Plus when it does eventually launch in the UK because the Walt Disney Company does not need any more of my money until they can pay their park workers a living wage. That's the hill I will die on. Should another remake of The Parent Trap occur, it would actually be the 6th title to be related to this franchise in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people don't really know this, but there were actually 3 television sequels to the original film that came out in the 1970s, but they are largely forgotten about. And since there is a lot of discussion right now about what the recent live-action Disney remakes have done wrong, I would like to talk a little bit in this video about what Meyers' remake did right. Now, I would like to preface this by saying that although this particular version came out when I was 3 years old, I actually grew up more on the Hayley Mills version, and I didn't actually know that a remake existed until I was in middle school, which was almost a decade after this movie came out. This is to say that I was definitely acutely aware of differences and callbacks to the original within this particular film. Meyers' remake does a great job of keeping the same classic premise that made the original so charming while updating it for a new generation. The most obvious advancement is the technology that is used to duplicate Lindsay's performances when her characters are on screen at the same time. This is largely accomplished with green screen techniques, but there are several things that Lindsay can do that Hayley Mills could not in the first film. For example, her characters can reach across the screen toward each other, they can cross in front of each other, whereas in the original film, whenever Hayley Mills' 2 characters were on screen at the same time, they were more or less confined to one half each of the frame. Another aspect that Meyers brought to this project is the updating of the jobs that the 2 main adult women have in this story. The girls' mother, Elizabeth, played by the late Natasha Richardson, is a successful designer in this version as opposed to just a posh aristocrat in the original. Now, she still lives a very posh aristocratic lifestyle in London, but she is also shown to be very hands-on in the workings of her business. Whether it be assisting on a photo shoot or conducting business calls in languages other than English. And Nick's fiancée, Meredith, played by Elaine Hendricks, although she is ostensibly after his money, she actually meets him through her own job as a publicist rather than as a socialite. There are also multiple references to the 90s themselves that almost make this film a period piece in its own right 20 years down the line. And these include appearances from Pop magazine, at-home ear piercings, and of course pictures of young Leonardo DiCaprio. And yet with all these changes to bring it to the 90s, the relative story structure and premise of the original remains unchanged. I mean, hey, if it ain't broke, don't mess with it. Some people might take issue with this film being slightly too similar to the original, but I think Meyers does enough with this version to make it stand on its own and be a fun watch in its own right. Perhaps a more prominent example of this type of remake would be the various A Star is Born remakes. Unfortunately, by sticking so closely to the story beats of the original script, this version does also inherit its problems with pacing. The scenes at camp where the girls are getting to know each other are very interesting, but the story starts to slow down a bit once they're on separate sides of the Atlantic and trying to impersonate each other. It does pick up again when the family unit is all back together and the twins continue scheming, but the movie is 2 hours long and sometimes it feels a little bit longer. The thing that really saves this movie for me by far is the performances of the entire cast. First, we have to mention Lindsay Lohan, who is not only making her feature film debut here, but is essentially playing 4 different roles: the twins, and the twins impersonating each other. She gives equally impressive performances as both Hallie and Annie, giving them distinct enough personalities that shine through even when they don't share the screen together. For example, Hallie is the more outgoing of the two, whereas Annie is a bit more quiet and shy. This whole scheme is Hallie's idea, and she seems far more sure of herself impersonating Annie than Annie does impersonating her. Annie, on the other hand, is more acutely aware of the stakes of their mission and making sure that it works, although she does break character more often, accidentally speaking fluent French in front of her father, played by Dennis Quaid, and refusing some of the American food that she is given. And this isn't even mentioning Lindsay Lohan's British accent in the film, which, although it is surprisingly convincing, it is a little bit too stereotypically posh for my taste. Regardless of personality, it is quite clear from the beginning that these twins need and complement each other, and that makes you root that much more for their family to get back together in the end. Richardson and Quaid are perfectly matched as the parents of these mischievous twins, and from the moment you see them, you just know that they were just somehow meant to be together. Richardson is so charming as the girls' mother. She's so wonderful and nurturing toward her daughters, and it's even hinted at toward the end that the girls got their mischievous streak from their mother. And Quaid is equally as impressive as their dad. He cares deeply about his daughters, and he does actually encourage Hallie not to embrace some female stereotypes. He is also slightly more open about his own affection for Liz than Liz is about her affection for him. And this is despite the fact that he is marrying Meredith very, very soon. Liz and Nick's relationship is also given time to be expanded upon outside of the context of their daughters. And although we know that they are going to end up together in the end, the film takes its time to examine some of the physical and emotional and practical obstacles that are standing in the way of them getting back together. The 4 of them together make up such a likable family unit that you just want them all to be able to live happily ever after together in the end. Of course, this film is populated by a great supporting cast, starting with our villain, Meredith. She is so perfectly unlikable, but she is also incredibly smart too, as seen in the scene where she goes toe-to-toe with Annie as Hallie. And while the parents might not see through their daughter's scheme, Meredith definitely is aware of it from the beginning. And the scene at the end where she just loses it is mwah, perfection. As an aside, as much as we all like to make fun of Meredith for not being able to cope with nature very well, I have to admit that I'm also not the biggest fan of being out in the wilderness for long periods of time. And this is coming from someone who grew up in northern Michigan. I'm so sorry. The family assistants in the film, Chessie, played by Lisa Ann Walter, and Martin, played by Simon Coons, are absolutely delightful, and their characters have much more charisma and personality than their counterparts in the original film. Chessie and Martin are not so much employees as they are family friends, and they both carry good relationships with the girls and even participate in some of their schemes. There are a few tiny cameos in the film, mostly from Lindsay's mother and siblings. And there is actually a cameo from Joanna Barnes as Meredith's mother, Vicky. Barnes, in case you don't know, plays the original evil fiance in the Haley Mills film, also named Vicky. So maybe we get a hint of what her life has been like since the other twins ruined her life? Maybe. There are a number of other passing references to the original movie as well. Hallie hums a little bit of Let's Get Together while she's waiting for an elevator. Reverend Mosby, the man that Meredith is talking to on the phone when Hallie first meets her, is the name of a character in the original film. And the name of the girls' summer camp is Camp Inch, a reference to the original camp director. Speaking of Let's Get Together, let's discuss the music in this film. Although it's not as much of a musical as the original film was, it still uses a robust number of songs to underscore the film and push the story forward. Songs by Nat King Cole and Natalie Cole bookend the film, and there's also appearances from The Loving Spoonful, The La's, and The Beatles. Alan Silvestri's score is also wonderful, conveying the girls' high spunk while also conveying the parents' touching romance. And if you listen very carefully at both the very beginning and very end of the film, including credits, there's a couple winking nods to Let's Get Together that I absolutely love. I mean, I would not be a musical score nerd if I didn't notice. The last thing I will touch on in regards to this film is how it sits in Nancy Meyers' canon, specifically as a director. I have touched on this a bit before in a dissertation that I wrote in college, but I will reiterate it again here. Nancy Meyers has more or less become known and slightly ridiculed for the attention that she pays to the detail of her production design and set design. I'm going to be honest, I don't think that this is necessarily a fair criticism of her work. Yes, her films as a whole do tend to center on upper-class white women, and The Parent Trap is no different, but she has talked at length about how a character's specific environment helps her inform her writing process. There is a fascinating BAFTA talk that she gave in which she discusses a scene from her other film, Something's Gotta Give. And she talks about how that scene in particular would not have worked if the production design of the actual film did not fit the way that she wrote it in the script. Specifically when it comes to things like layout or how a character gets from point A to point B. And going beyond that, I have to say, of the 6 films that she has directed, The Parent Trap arguably seems the least concerned with showing off the production design. In fact, the production designs and house layouts that we do see in the film actually serve an important purpose while Annie and Hallie are getting to know each other so they can impersonate each other. I mean, if they are going to make this as convincing as possible, they need to know the layout of each other's houses as though they've been living in them for 11 years. And yes, while I wish that Nancy Meyers would focus a bit more on more diverse women in future projects, I do have to appreciate the fact that she is a female director that has had almost total creative control over her films as a director, as a writer, as a producer for the last 20 years or so. That type of thing is very rare, and I have to admire that kind of drive. Not to mention that she has actually written for a diverse set of ages of women. And again, what I will say is that I hope that in the future she chooses to focus on a more diverse set of women. And that's all I will say on that. In any case, while Nancy Meyers' version of this film is not perfect, it still pays wonderful homage to the project that inspired it while still managing to stand on its own as a fun family romp. If Disney does decide to remake this again, I hope they can take a cue from Meyers, take the same charming prompt and update it for a new generation. Although with the advent of all the technology that's emerged in the last 20 years, I don't know if that particular premise would work nowadays. We'll see. Anyways, thank you so much for taking a trip down memory lane with me. I had a ton of fun watching and reviewing this, even if there were a couple of technological setbacks. Next week will be the first animated film that I've talked about on this channel, Frozen. I had to cross that bridge at some point, and it definitely might have something to do with a certain sequel that's coming out in a couple weeks. Make sure to subscribe to my main channel for new women in film reviews every other Sunday. Let's just remember that schedule change. And remember to share these reviews with your friends, family, colleagues, whomever. My aim with these reviews is to start some informed discussions on the films that I cover, and I want you guys to be a part of that by sharing these and pushing these discussions forward. I'm actually also going to start making some informal content on my second channel. I just did a recent reads video that'll be going up probably sometime within the next week or so. So subscribe to my second channel for that. The link will be in the description. In terms of other topics I'll discuss on there, it's more things that I want to talk about but don't necessarily fit into what I'm trying to do with this channel. Make sure to comment below suggestions for things you'd like me to talk about on either channel, and make sure to tell me what you guys think of The Parent Trap. I'm dying to know. I mean, it's always so interesting once we get into discussing like childhood favorites, let's be honest here. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at HelenMarie95 and on Instagram at HelenMarie_95. Make sure to follow my blog, helengrotheisblog.wordpress.com. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Remember to keep living awesome lives, and I will see you all in a couple of weeks. Bye.